welcome. If this is your first time, welcome back. This is our fall series. We did it last year, and I think we'll probably do it every year because it's so much fun interpreting this weird and wonderful city. And so this year, what we're doing is looking at the city through its literary light. And yes, we started with Helen Hunt Jackson's Ramona, the creation myth of Los Angeles. And we did those other authors and done some amazing authors, including Eve Babbitt's. Was that 2 weeks ago? Yeah, we did Eve Babbitt's. And we've got a couple more. And one of the great joys for me in doing this is to re-engage great writers like Fitzgerald and James M. Cain and Didion, and to introduce you to writers you may not know. So the next 2 weeks after tonight are Helena Biramontes, who is a brilliant, brilliant writer that you're going to love. Two novels in particular, Under the Feet of Jesus, and Their Dogs Came With Them, all about Los Angeles lives. Well, Under the Feet of Jesus is really about migrant workers in the valley. And then we're going to end with Vanessa Place, who is wonderfully weird and powerful, a lawyer, and an artist who wrote a novel about Los Angeles called L.A. Medusa. And I was in as soon as I read the title. But tonight is Jerry Stahl, our old friend. Stories you don't want to tell. These are the stories you do not want to tell, he writes in Permanent Midnight. There are stories that scald your brain pan right down to the tongue at the mere thought of uttering. But you can't not. Even if you wait until your skull is nothing but a charred and smoking husk, the truth will still be in there, squirming. He also calls Los Angeles the city I lived in but had nothing to do with. So this is an interesting talk tonight. I'm really eager to share with you what Jerry has written and maybe offer some observations along the way. It's interesting, too, to work our way up to contemporary living writers whose voices are still out there. So this is his birth, and we know quite a bit about his life. He says, and this is in Permanent Midnight, I believe, some people are inspired by great love or religion or history. I was inspired by a mother hanging my underwear out for all my friends to see with the stains in them when I was 3, and being traumatized for the rest of my interestingly odd, demented life. He was the son of a Ukrainian Jew, a father who came to the U.S., Ukrainian Jew. I know. Who would have thought that Ukraine would occupy such a prominent place in our discourse? He came to the U.S. with nothing, working his way up from a solicitor to a federal judge. That story, right? That American story of immigrants making it here. He was, by all accounts, on the outside world, a tremendous success. Home life, and marriage was much harder to deal with. Jerry writes, my father used to put his head through the wall when he and my mother would fight. My mother would be the screamer, my father the shut-down immigrant Russian guy, but we never fixed those holes. So it was like the whole house was a museum of dad rage. And you will not be surprised that he checked out early, ending his own life a year before his 50th birthday, when his son was 16. Jerry writes, our family business was shame. Our family business was shame. I want you to remember that as we go through some of these works of his. And so this 16-year-old Jerry Stahl was left to deal with a mother unable or unwilling to come to terms with the fact that her husband had killed himself. So what do? Well, many people die. They check out themselves. They give up. Jerry found solace and survival in writing. Writing provided an escape. Figures like Hubert Selby Jr., Terry Southern, Hunter S. Thompson, whose voice you will hear in the background tonight. And Stahl cut his teeth freelancing for the Village Voice, earned his living in pornography, writing pornography. You'll hear about this. Well, he wrote, the Penthouse letters. I'm sorry to shock some of you, but those are not real. Jerry Stahl wrote most of them, and the responses. He wrote captions for sex toys. He became one of the main writers for Larry Flint's Hustler. And some really funny scenes about that. He wrote and directed a porn movie called Cafe Flesh. Oh, and some novels. Journalism was really his genre and his métier. He says this: when I was a journalist, I liked going into the weird worlds of people who have their own language and their own thing. He spent times at a singles retreat in Topanga Canyon, dogged a bounty hunter, interviewed Ronald Reagan's barber. He did some TV. He did a lot of TV writing, you're going to see. He credits writing Permanent Midnight with saving his life. So these are his works. And this is from an article in Lit Hub that I really like. Let's see, who wrote this? Sabra Emery. These days, she writes, it may be more accurate to think of Stahl as one of Bukowski's true heirs. I would agree with that. He's a writer whose dredging of Los Angeles has created a literary universe of damage, humor, and hope. The article is titled, Jerry Stahl on Hep C, Fat Suits, and Masturbating Babies. You'll hear about this. He's had a couple of children, and he can't get over the fact that they are born masturbating, but you can ask him about that. Pushcart Prize in 1976. Started screenwriting in the mid to late 80s for the popular television show, does anybody know? Alf. Thank you, for Alf. So I want you to always remember when I'm quoting Jerry Stahl tonight that this is the voice behind Alf, which was a sitcom. You remember, BJ? Yeah, it's alien life form, a puppet. Where do you see the film? Yeah, where the puppet turns on him. He wrote for Moonlighting, Bruce Willis's first vehicle, Sybil Shepherd, right? 30-something. I remember 30-something when I was 30-something. Twin Peaks, we can talk about this. He talks about it. I don't know how he got the credit for Twin Peaks, frankly. He would tell you he didn't deserve it. Northern Exposure, remember that show? Most of his credits are in writing, and he's good. He had an incredible run as a consultant on CSI, offering insights on the episodes about furries. If you don't know, ask your seatmate. S&M and infantilism, because where are you going to get experts on all three of those things? He co-wrote the screenplay for what he calls the art house sleeper Bad Boys 2. And more recently, he wrote the screenplay for Hemingway and Gellhorn, that HBO film about Ernest Hemingway and Margaret Gellhorn that won a Writers Guild Award. So there's his work. We're going to go through some of it, and I'm going to spend a lot of time, if you don't mind, on Permanent Midnight. It's a memoir. And, okay, so it's a drug memoir. It's, in that genre, Thomas De Quincey, William Burroughs, Hunter S. Thompson, etc. And it's brilliant, and some of the most painful and dark stuff I've ever read, and I like the dark stuff. But I don't know, it just really moved me and touched me in ways I didn't expect. And I have a theory about it. And I was just going to tell you, I'm not going to be coy. I think the genre of Permanent Midnight is spiritual autobiography. I think it's not unlike the Confessions of St. Augustine, with a lot of heroin. So stay with me, and we'll go through it in some detail. So there are the stories you don't want to tell that I've already read you about. Junkies and TV writers. No, drug-wise, what happened with TV was just a matter of progression. It's not like I ever wanted to wake up and just be a grossly overpaid, self-loathing, can't look in the mirror without gagging TV writer. A junkie, maybe, but not a TV writer. So we've seen this throughout the series, this real hatred of TV writing, and yet they keep writing. It probably affected Fitzgerald more than anyone. Fonte hated it, but made it work for him and made a good living. James M. Cain did very fine with it. But I haven't come across a television writer who hasn't spoken of how much he or she loathes that job. I don't think that means anything other than perhaps it's a one kind of writer forced to be doing a different kind of writing. But I don't know. Maybe some of the writers in the room can enlighten me. Many scenes and experiences here, too many to try to convey to you in our short time together. So I've tried to take some snapshots from the book that give you a sense not only of Jerry and his life, but also Los Angeles. So he's hooking up with all kinds of people, women, men, mostly drug dealers. And he writes this in Permanent Midnight. So this lanky, ruby-lipped Teutonic artiste and I, this is a woman visiting from Germany to get away from her husband. She and I ended up slouching arm in arm down Hollywood Boulevard at the ungodly hour of 10 in the morning. See if you can relate to this. I live just off Hollywood Boulevard. Even at that time of day, the sunlight is so harsh that it drives any sane citizen to take shelter. Only in Los Angeles does the light have that dread-soaked, accusing quality, as if the sun itself were screaming at you. What the fuck are you doing out in the street? What's wrong with your life? The city fathers, in some kind of twisted homage, made the sidewalks actually sparkle along Hollywood Boulevard. You can get a headache from the twinkling masonry in between the pathetic stars embedded in the concrete, making of the great what the not-so-great never will be secretly want all along, a dead and unresisting doormat. So he's not from Los Angeles, he's from Pittsburgh. We arrived in Los Angeles during a season of unceasing rain. My first drive down Santa Monica Boulevard to Hustler's Century City headquarters. He's just gotten this job with Larry Flint. And I love this, this keen sense of observation and then how you characterize it. The overlarge plant life fronting the boulevard actually frightened me. It seemed so glandular, the enormous fleshy ferns and cacti reaching toward the street, as if to lure pedestrians into some fatal steroid-laden embrace. There were, however, no pedestrians, so the plants had already eaten. So perhaps the plants had already eaten them. Here, I thought, with a certitude that startled me, is the city I'm going to die in. A place where everything that can kill you is beautiful and green. And then, of course, this is a Hollywood work, and Hollywood does, create its own monsters, and is its own monster. He writes, that's the trouble with this business, and I know some of you are in this business. People are always offering you things, and as soon as they're mentioned, even if the idea never occurred to you before, you feel like you really want them. By the end of the conversation, whatever they're dangling before you, which you didn't know existed 3 minutes ago, has now become an absolute necessity. At which point, whoever called you in the first place is now comfortable taking it away. They've done their job. So there's a lot of, I was going to say name dropping. It's not name dropping. He has these experiences with these people. So some of you may know Quincy, the character Quincy, Jack Klugman, right from that show. So he has a meeting with Jack Klugman, and he just screams at him. Klugman just screams at him. He's never met Jerry Stahl before, but he comes in and he just starts screaming at him. Throughout his entire tirade, Jerry writes, I had this irrational, and I love this, I had this irrational feeling I was being screamed at through a TV screen. His leathery features seemed no more real to me than Elmer Fudd's. And this is right, I think. I mean, if you know celebrities, this is right. Such is the curiously diminished impact of celebrity. So saturated with cast-off Quincy visions, brain dreck from half-digested Odd Couples and old Twilight Zones, the mind cannot wrap itself around the notion that the star of all these 2D memories is suddenly three-dimensional. Well, and again, I think this is a spiritual autobiography, and you'll especially see that at the end, I hope, but throughout there are these moments. They're just these moments where he becomes a philosopher or reveals that he's a philosopher. He writes, life can be lived as a temporary arrangement. Life is a temporary arrangement, but the longer you go without changing, the more obscure the likelihood you ever will. After enough time passes, the idea of any other way of life grows ever more misty. That's the truth. That's some truth there, Jerry. And as I get older, I find that more and more to be the case, is that a full life, a meaningful life, is a life that is open to change, and the wounding and the pain that comes with that, but also the rewards that come with that. Where I'm from, in the South, this is the opposite virtue of what you had. You were supposed to get in your lane as early as possible, and my friends back home certainly did. They got in that lane early as possible, and they stayed in it. And when life came, or when other people came and said, hey, you know, there's a whole other road over here, and they clung to it and rejected it. And then what happens is the tighter you hang on to it, the angrier you become, because you know at some point that there's another road, there are other roads, you see it, and then you resent yourself for not recognizing that life is a temporary arrangement and that you had so many opportunities to change, and you rejected them invariably out of fear. Here's a little Los Feliz story. He is married to, this may not surprise you at all, he was married initially to this brilliant professional woman who worked in the industry and allowed him to be who he was. She was the exact opposite of him in so many ways. She took care of her shit. She handled things. She handled him. She handled the house. So she was also British and needed to stay to work in Hollywood. And so it was one of those marriages. She actually paid him $3,000 to marry her. I know, right? And so they get their first house together in Los Feliz. The first house we looked in, a dirty white stucco number in the shadow of the ABC broadcast tower in Los Feliz. Is that still here? I don't know that. The broadcast tower? I found myself drifting into the bathroom while my competent half chatted with the lady of the house about foundation crumbling and earthquake sturdiness. Metaphor much? Sadly, I found nothing more exciting than the Motrin in the medicine cabinet. So he talks about the great joy he has in visiting people's houses and going immediately to the medicine cabinet, and he has a whole routine about how to get their drugs. And so, he lays it all out there. You've got to leave a few, right? If you take the whole thing, people are going to go, where's my Percodan? So you just got to leave a few, and then sometimes you can even replace them with aspirin. And he's got a whole procedure here. But here he finds nothing more exciting than Motrin. Though the cap had been left off and a handful of the little buggers scattered wantonly around the bottom shelf amid Q-tips and Desinex, this peek into the matron's state of mind supplied little more than a shiver of guilty excitement. Nothing grander than what a career-peeping Tom might garnish on a slow news day. It wasn't the medicine chest strikeout that threw me, though. He rhapsodizes about other medicine chests he's visited. It wasn't that strikeout that threw me. It was that jumbo TV tower looming over the backyard. Now remember, this is one of the most decadent junkies you will ever meet. He writes this: the specter of the constant low-frequency vibration, hidden cancer causers, beaming waves of tumor food right through our bedroom window. No, thank you. See, I may have been a junkie, but I knew about health. I knew what was bad for you. I didn't eat meat, no chicken or fish either. Vegetarian for years and proud of it. You think I'm going to put a piece of steak in my mouth? What with all those Frankenstein hormones they pump in? Heck no, I was a California junkie. Rarely a day went by when I did not stop into the Beverly Hills juice bar to douse my internal organs with a double shot of wheatgrass and carrot juice chaser. A California junkie. And then he has these wonderful moments where he's just taken by things, and I love this about the book, is that he's things we wouldn't notice probably, but he, like many people on drugs, I guess, focus on something and just can't stop looking at it and, writing about it and thinking about it. And in this yard is what he calls the cartoon cactus. Some 20 feet of rubbery spiked needle trees sporting juicy red growths of no known origin, and though I didn't know it then, awe-inspiring pink blossoms that show themselves and open only on moonlit nights when it's in the mood. That's a particular kind of cactus, yeah. What I did know, just looking at the thing, was that it symbolized everything I loved and hated about the city I lived in. At once fake-looking and genuinely dangerous, colorful to the eye and fatal to the touch. If a pterodactyl had flapped out of the banana tree bunch behind it, I would not have been surprised. And throughout, there are these incredible insights. If you're a writer and interested, you don't have to be, but interested in writing about writing, I can't recommend Permanent Midnight enough. There are just these moments where he talks about writing that are stunning. Here's one. That's what you remember, or if you're a writer, what you write about. That's what's so strange. Sometimes I feel like a writer. Sometimes I just feel like a snitch. Although in the end, the only person I'm ratting out is myself. At this point, I don't even know the difference between truth and shame. This is especially true of memoirists, right? If it hurts, if I don't want to say it, then it must be true. How about that? How about I live my life like that? If it hurts, if I don't want to say it, then it must be true. How would our lives change if we just did that? If it hurts, it must be true. He continues, that's the only compass I have. The trick is to lay out the soul, but let the brain and body float on, which is what, with that needle in your arm, you think you're doing, until you realize inevitably that you're not, that you're just generating more pain, more penance for the one sin you couldn't help commit, the sin of being born. Maybe I should have issued a warning before we started talking about this today. Some dark stuff, but really powerful and true. If it hurts, it must be true. Now listen to this. Listen to this. This is a junkie writing. And I think we must recognize all the paths as potentially spiritual paths, including that of the junkie, maybe especially that of the junkie. Listen, you don't exactly hallucinate on smack. He did everything. But you do see when the first fast rush courses north to glory, the smiles of all the unseen beings in the world nodding in the shadows. All the benevolence hidden in the universe makes itself known. Tell me that's not an ecstatic experience. Very much like St. Augustine or any other religious experience. The spirits reveal themselves because they know when the rushing stops and the gush wears off, you'll forget about them. You'll see the world then in a different way, as an awful, hateful place where every breeze that blows is like the hateful breath of Moloch on your flesh. I sit there staring out over the swaying palms here in Los Feliz, over the rooftops to the red sun sinking in the far-off ocean, with a hiss whose steam I feel across my flesh. I don't think I knew what was going to happen in that home, how I'd blow my marriage, be brutally strung out, barely escape murdering my own baby through sheer narcotic carelessness. I should probably tell you that Permanent Midnight opens and returns to us one of the most horrific scenes in literature. He's having his first baby, but he's a junkie. And so his wife is giving birth. This is his British wife is giving birth. And he's in the bathroom shooting up while the birth is occurring. And so they knock on the door and say, dude, come out, your baby's being born, your little daughter's being born. And he comes out, he's shot up, and he's dressed in all black because that's his uniform. And they say, dude, you gotta, take that off, take your jacket off and put these scrubs on, which are of course short sleeve. And so he does, and the doctor, you should read it, the description of the doctor's face when he sees blood literally running down this guy's arms as his baby is being born. And yes, how can you call that a spiritual autobiography? How can you call this a spiritual book? Because he told it. He told the story. And sure, that's a horrific scene, but it's also a metaphor for all our failures. As deep as they go, as shallow as they go, we are of the same species. All right, here you go. Here's my thesis. Pretty clearly, drug addiction is no different from any other religion. Sometimes the ritual is all that matters. Sometimes the ritual is all that matters. Most of the people I know who go to church, and this is a knock on church, this is not a knock on church, this is simply agreeing with his observation. The ritual's all that matters. Again, I grew up in the South where religion is embedded in the culture in ways that it is not in other places, especially a certain kind of Protestantism and evangelicalism. And I never really understood the ritual. In fact, I grew up resenting the ritual. I really did, and it's made me so allergic to empty ritual, so allergic to ritual that has the form but not the content of meaning. Drug addiction is no different from any other religion. Sometimes the ritual is all that matters. And people, we will cling to an empty ritual rather than acknowledge it as empty. All right, enough sermonizing. Yes, I love this line. The only people who work in Los Angeles. So what started as a one-time treat, this is one of his drugs, I forget, progressed immediately to daily, then twice daily, then ultimately an all-day adventure in addiction. I'd begun a pattern that was to define my days for some time to come now. Out of the house at daybreak, I'd shoot down Rampart, cut over to Western, then south through Koreatown. You're doing it right now in your mind, aren't you? Past all the beat furniture stores and plastic pod malls, down to Skankland. With every block, the clumps of well-scrubbed Latinos at the bus stops. The only people in the city who actually seem to work for a living. Cleaning up after all the Angelinos who just make money. Gave way to the smatterings of winos passed out in doorways, then to muttering crackheads, head down, scuffling up the filthy sidewalks, vainly scoping the dog shit and broken glass for one lost piece dropped in the street, compulsively rifling their own shot pockets for the morning hit that would make their hell-sparked circuits hum smoothly for a minute or two, cool out that blast furnace melting all the wires in their eyeballs. And then again, we're shifting very quickly, probably like the life of a junkie, and now it's about writing. This is what I think. If you had the nerve to live the life you lived, you should have the nerve to write about it. If you had the nerve to live the life you lived, you should have the nerve to write about it. Again, I would say that this is one of the features of a spiritual autobiography, is trying to find the truth. The truth. And the truth is never platonic. It's existential. It's the nerve to live the life you live, but then to write the life you lived. David Lynch calls. He's somewhere in Laurel Canyon, totally fucked up. In fact, I didn't want to read too much to you, but I almost put this in there because it's David Lynch, okay? It's the call you're waiting for if you're a writer, right? But he's so high that he can't hear them. And somebody's screaming. He's like, "Why are you screaming?" And he goes on for a paragraph, and he realizes the phone is upside down. And so he's talking into the into the earpiece. And they finally, his agent, who is a saint, finally convinces him to flip the phone around. He writes, David Lynch's minions wanted me on board, or at least on script, for the second season of Twin Peaks. Needless to say, I was professional as ever. When the phone rang again, I was so far gone, it took 15 minutes to remember where I was. For the first few moments, it was all, here it is. For the first few moments, it was all kind of foggy, until my agent, Ever the Pro, suggested I turn the phone around. I've been talking into the receiver. He was helpful that way. Now, he says in the book that he screwed this up, and he goes to one meeting and Mark Frost just decimates him because he starts babbling about something, and it's a meeting for Twin Peaks, and Mark Frost is leading it, and I guess Jerry was being Jerry and just decimated him with this withering sarcasm. So he says it didn't happen. But I was just in Twin Peaks, if you will, and I watched the episode, and he has the writing credit. So I don't know if that's some sort of union thing or something, but he says he didn't write the episode, but he's got the credit on it. It's a good episode. It's the one where the judge comes into town. Anyway, and I love this. This is another, I think, deep spiritual insight. The horrific part about getting clean is that at the weakest point in your life, you're required to be the strongest. You know, that may not be just about getting clean. That may be for all of us. There are moments in our lives where we're at our weakest, and those are the times where we're required to be our strongest. It's a brutal paradox, but I think it's true. Oh my God, who's he talking to now? There's some show they want him to write for. He's a lucky dude because partly because he's such a good writer. They keep trying to pull him out of these drug-induced hazes to write. And so at one point he's so wrecked. He doesn't have a car, he doesn't have a driver's license, and so he has to go over to Culver City from Los Feliz, and he doesn't have a car, so he takes the bus, and he's got a wonderful description of taking the bus from Los Feliz to Culver City. So it's one of these studio guys talking to him. I'm sure you know some of these guys. And he's like, Jesus, Jerry, what's wrong with you? And Jerry's like, it's been kind of rough. And of course people know that he's been in rehab and that he's a mess. And so this studio guy says, well, it's not that bad, is it? This guy's name is Mealy. And hanging out with the people you hang out with when you're a drug addict. He said, it's LA. It's not like it's New York, the guy says. It's not dangerous or anything. And Jerry writes, to which, of course, there really is no response. He wasn't being stupid. He was being honest. He was being honest. And friendly on top of that. In the Los Angeles he inhabited, what he was saying was absolutely true. And since there were countless nice white humans who'd never been east of La Brea, who lived in LA without even seeing what 90% of LA really was, he was being accurate too. Of course, this was before Rodney King and the LAPD made their video debut. I don't know whether to envy or pity him. And in fact, one of the most poignant scenes in Permanent Midnight, and the one that kind of begins the end of the book, is during the LA riots. And he's so funny. Oh my God, he's so funny. So he has no car. He's living somewhere near Sunset, but he walks down to Koreatown to get a Perrier because he loves his Perrier. And he's walking all that way to get one Perrier. And the LA riots happen in Koreatown. I forget what I came for. I stand stupidly in front of the cooler of this little bodega. I finally reach in and select a bottle of Perrier. I remember now. I'm thirsty. I hold it for some reason with two hands. I turn around and see the place is full now, mobbed, half black, half brown, and me, el Anglo estupido. I start for the counter, reach in my pocket. I haven't gotten the hang of looting, so I'm going to pay. I've just realized that it is looting. It's like gravity has stopped working. Some fundamental law has not been so much violated as reversed. Things float off the shelves. Out of coolers, they jump into your hand. I can't tell if I'm high or this is how it feels when the world goes insane. Cops come in, line everybody up. Jerry Stahl, the East Coast Ukrainian Jew, black people, Latino people. The cop looks at Jerry and says, "You go." The black cop barks at me again. He has to tell him twice. I start to protest. There's a black guy with a jacket with lunch meat coming out of it. Lunch meat looks at me. Our eyes meet. I want to say, no, you wouldn't understand. I'm just like you. But of course I'm not. I never will be. For some reason, I think of Sammy, of Rulina. These are his crackhead friends who he hangs out with. I wonder if they're still downtown. I wonder if they're still on the crack wagon. You go. He comes back home. I think he walks it. Comes back to Los Feliz, and he says, I am a city in ruin. I hear myself declaiming at one point, I am burning, but I cannot be consumed. The phrases come out of me, scare me, wake me out of this half stupor I struggle to maintain. If I knew how to hang myself, I would, but I've never been very good with knots. Never been good with my hands. I have never, I think, been good with anything. The scariest is when I come to outside, face down in the dirt, my mouth full of wet mud, tongue clogged with earth soaked through with my own urine, my own liquid puke. I can't tell the mud from my puke. And when I try to stand, at least raise myself up enough to crawl, I feel my fingers sink, squish into the steaming shit I've left everywhere, trailed behind me like some kind of diseased slug. Something tickles my skin. I feel it on my face. Feathers? Could it be? Have I entered some Garcia Marquez story where my life ends with silent feathers wafting down from the heavens onto my ravaged flesh? But no, I realize no, it isn't feathers, it's soot. It's ashes. The floating, lighter than air remains of God knows what. Because the sky by now is black, well, maybe a little lighter, a deep and dirty looking gray. And the ending of this memoir is one of the most religious texts I've ever read, and I wanted to share it with you. So keep in mind what's happened. The LA riots are happening. He's just been in the store for a Perrier, lined up with everybody else and told to go. He's out of his mind, high, and he's come back and shit himself and vomited all over and fell into the mud in his own piss and excrement, and he's standing there, and you tell me that's not a moment for a spiritual revelation. The underside of the world, I think, gazing through my itching eyes, the bottom has become the top, yeah. Does this, I think, smiling in spite of myself, feeling my lips break the shell of the tainted mud that is coated and dried over them, does this mean the dead will come drifting down from the sky, poured out of the earth they were buried in? I would like that, I think. I'm ready for that. I'm prepared. Maybe that's all this was. Everything that led up to this moment in the dirt ever was. Preparing for a meeting with the dead. Preparing to see my Father, who I've not let myself miss, who I've never mourned, who is even now, I think, watching my every move, shaking his head, furrowing his brow at the sad dynamic that drives his boy to just get worse, just sink farther and farther down. Far enough to meet you, Daddy. If I sink far enough, I'll be in the ground with you. And what will you say? I will say, I'm sorry. And what will you say after that? I will say it's over. And so miraculously or not, so it was. That is some excellent writing. And he ends it this way, with a baptism. He's been looking for the hose to wash himself off. After that declamation, he finds it. The hose was in front of me, as if it had been there all along. Indeed, Jerry, it had been there all along. Which, of course, it had been, he writes. I spotted the coiled hose. I don't know how I could not have seen it. Right? Perhaps I did not want to. So many hells that were once potential were now fully realized. For me, in my peculiar lightness, this was incredibly reassuring. And if you've been through the hells, you know it's reassuring. William Blake knew it was reassuring. There was nothing else to fear, because what I had feared had already happened. I had made it happen, and here I was, relieved as only the dead can be. It didn't matter now. Nothing did. The scum had boiled to the surface and burned off, and what remained was all that had to remain. Tell me that's not spiritual writing. All right, let's ease up a little bit. He wrote for the Rumpus a column called OG Dead. So he has another daughter. He convinces someone else to marry him, amazingly. And this becomes a book, which it is, subtitled Weird Shit Happens When You Don't Die Young. This is at the Rumpus, which you can read now. So let me just, if those of you who have kids will especially appreciate this. Waiting for a baby to be born is like sitting in Nagasaki listening to the hum of planes overhead and wondering when the little joy bomb is going to be dropped and destroy your life. In a good way. And ours is supposed to drop any minute. It's no wonder he's a television writer. He is a master writer at creating a scene and capturing a scene and also peeling off the layers of a scene. So just listen to this. I love this story. So he's in Austin, and he has not been in Austin because he had been trying a new treatment, a radical new treatment for Hep C. He got Hep C, big surprise. And the treatment was so potent that they told him that if he even touched his wife, if he even touched her with these drugs in his system, it would produce a deformed child. So she goes to Austin, he stays in LA. But finally the treatment is over and it works. And now they're in Austin and they're going to the OBGYN. Whatever enlightenment has pulled in this wet spot in the center of the Lone Star State, it did not seem to, because before that he's talking about how Austin is so hip, and it is. It did not seem to spill over into the perinatal clinic to which our OBGYN has dispatched us in order to screen for every infant malady known to humanity. All well and good, until filling out a form by the frosted glass window, the beehived lovely, in charge of our application, raised her eyes and asked, in a tone somewhere between the blasé and pre-chunk blowing, "So, like, are Jews Caucasians?" I just looked at her, what? This time another nurse / receptionist type stuck her head out, doing little to hide her distaste, and barked in a voice loud enough to rouse the New Mommy magazine readers in the far corner of the waiting room. "Sir, we have to do a Jew panel." Excuse me? For one brief second, I thought I saw the ghost of Mengele waft over the counter. He had used to measure noses with calipers to sniff out the latent smites. "Jew panel," she repeated. "We don't get a lot of your people around here. We need to check for Tay-Sachs and cystic fibrosis." Turning away, I felt a dozen sets of Texan eyes upon me as I rolled back to take my seat beside my blue-eyed, blonde-haired Vikingette girlfriend. She saw the look on my face. "Jesus, baby, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I lied. "I just hope we make it back to the car without getting rounded up and sent to some panhandle Auschwitz. Most places, they at least try to pretend they don't hate you." "Oh, they don't hate you, it's Texas," she said, sounding like the guy who tells Jack Nicholson, "Come on, Jake, it's Chinatown." Right after John Huston shoots Faye Dunaway and scoops up her wailing product of incest daughter. Oh my God. Among the many things that Jerry's work is a deep critique of masculinity. So here's a little vignette about that. They go to a gynecologist in Beverly Hills, and the gynecologist is examining his wife, and he says to her, "You ride horses. That explains those beautiful legs." Admittedly, she does have beautiful legs, but really, do you want to hear your obstetrician talking about your wife's beautiful legs? If this weren't bad enough, a minute later, while he was all up inside her, the old beefcake got, I will swear this to my grave, a dreamy smile on his face. As soon as I saw this, I was ready to snap. But a second later, while still probing, "Looks good in there," he exchanged a little smile with my wife. Again, I managed to hold my mud, but back in the car, I'm not going to lie, I had to bring it up. So I said, "Do you like this guy?" "He's all right. The important thing is that the baby is okay." "Of course," I agree, regretting what I'm about to say even before I say it. But what I'm talking about is you seem to, enjoy the examination. Come again? "I don't know," I babble on, feeling myself lurch deeper into idiocy with every syllable. I'm not the jealous type, but this is just too much. I turn the key in my old caddy's ignition and continue. "I'm just saying, when he was inside you, it's kind of fucked up, but he looked like he was enjoying himself. And you had this smile on your face. The one you sometimes get when..." Anyway, he'd already made that creepy remark about your legs, so I thought maybe... You thought what? By now I know I've crossed the line. This has all the makings of an epic car fight. And car fights are awesome, aren't they? Because you're trapped. But instead of yelling, E, to her eternal credit, just turns to me as we peel out of the lot and laughs in my face. Bless her heart. "Are you insane? First of all, that's a completely bizarre thing to think. Second of all, the man is gay. Didn't you see all those pictures of him and his partner? While you're in the bathroom, he told me that he and Ted were happily married. Really? Did his hand feel gay when it was inside of you?" My eyes stay on the road as we nose out onto the Hollywood freeway. Holy shit, you're jealous of a gynecologist. Of course not, I lie, and have to swerve to miss a fuel truck. Barely managing to spare the three of us, the future mom, the future baby, and the currently babbling dead, a fiery, horrific death. All right. Oh my God. So another doctor visit. "Come in tomorrow morning," the doctor says, after stripping E's membrane again, and by now I imagine the thing must look like pastrami. "I'll inject you with Pitocin. This kicks in the oxytocin." Naturally, I perk up. "Oxycontin? The body produces that?" Funny thing about being clean for a while, you can be off the hard stuff for decades, and at the mention of a freebie, your brain just kicks right back in to junkie think. As in, wait, women produce hillbilly heroin when they have babies? Why can't I get pregnant? Well, our little doctor exudes reassurance. Sometimes inducing does increase the risk of a cesarean, which aside from the fact that it's, surgery, means the baby won't get all that good immune-boosting flora and fauna when it passes through the birth canal vaginally. Flora and fauna? That sounds so rainforesty. I know, I say, I get this image of a toddler being dragged on a bobsled through the Amazon. In a way, the doctor says, Babies are born with a sterile digestive tract. They need this introduction of bacteria and such for digestion and detoxing heavy metals, and the best way to get through, etc. And somehow I wonder, Jerry writes, if this means cunnilingus is a great way to avoid colds. But it seems wrong to ask. And the baby is born, of course. There she is on the cover. I'm writing this with a half-day-old 6-pound, 9-ounce newborn and Patton Oswalt look-alike baby curled in my left arm, typing one-handed with a precariously balanced MacBook on my crotch, the radiation thus ensuring that she'll have no brothers or sisters, breathing betadine fumes and wonder whether the roar blasting through my heart is love, sleeplessness, or backed-up hospital waffles. Don't let the idyllic lead fool you. The night behind us has been so Game of Thronesy that even now the blood squishes underfoot, the floor is littered with cast-off scarlet rags, stained plastic gloves, and the sound of wailing is never far off or far away. In fact, let's rewind, since the screaming's still in my ears. And while I love Permanent Midnight, I love even more I, Fatty. If you don't know this book, please, please go out and read it. It is the true story of Roscoe Arbuckle, known as Fatty, the first movie star. Philip Seymour Hoffman, Johnny Depp optioned the novel. Philip Seymour Hoffman was slated to play Fatty. And he told Jerry, he said, the first time we met, he thought the book was more about me than Arbuckle. He saw it as a kind of disguised autobiography, me in a fat suit, which Fatty actually had to wear after he lost a ton of weight kicking a heroin habit. We talked about the movie, and he had the genius idea of making the fat suit a character. Sadly, that never happened. He says, this is all in the introduction, which is a great introduction to the book. It begins with Jerry face down on Adams Street, being arrested in front of Fatty Arbuckle's house. The book is mysterious even to me. I know that I wrote about 50 pages of it during a 2-day trip to the Dominican Republic, don't ask. And I remember talking it out loud and taking it down, not exactly like dictation, more like I wanted to remember what came out of my mouth so I'd know what to tell the doctor. People have lofty words like channeling, sorry about my voice, or being a vessel, which God bless, I am thrilled to hear about their experience. With me, it's more like fatty Tourette's. It was like being a ventriloquist with no hands. And here's the story. I was once picked up by the police on Fatty Arbuckle's front lawn, all of which would have meant absolutely nothing if not for the fact that 3/4 of a century earlier, in 1916, a fetus-faced, 5'7", 375-pound millionaire was shooting heroin and contemplating his ruin in the very chamber from which the strange white faces stared down at mine. Who knows but that Arbuckle, nodding in some bygone era, closed his eyes and heard the cries of drug abusers 3 generations unconceived stumbling down the sidewalk of the house he occupied. And just a few scenes from I, Fatty. Oh, excuse me, I'm still on the introduction. At the time of his needle ride, 29-year-old Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was more popular than Charlie Chaplin. And on that particular August day, at the screaming height of World War I, in an upscale corner of the cowtown packed with transplanted white trash, yes, that's us, first-generation Euro escape artists, marginal theatrical types, and native Mexicans, the colossal nodding Arbuckle could claim to be the most loved movie star waddling the earth, if not the most clean living. You may know this story about Roscoe Arbuckle. He was charged with rape in San Francisco, which he pretty clearly didn't do. And Jerry writes this, not that A jury's version of reality, he was acquitted, has much to do with it was complicated. There were several trials. One thing Roscoe learned, the way one does after surviving 3 murder trials, worldwide vilification, jail, and pie fights, is that what people are willing to believe about a man and what a man believes about himself tend to be wildly divergent enterprises. Again, take that line, live by it. What people are willing to believe about a person and what a person believes about herself can be wildly divergent enterprises. I know my own life, I have lived by the former so much that I didn't even know who I was. Roscoe was the OJ of his day, Stahl writes. The difference, aside from small matters of race, guilt, and innocence, is that for his crimes, not only was Roscoe hounded from the top of the Hollywood food chain to the bottom, but the furor over his alleged behavior left Hollywood itself nearly hounded out of existence, and this is true, victim of a morally indignant, rabidly fascinating, tabloid-fed public. Thank the goddess we're no longer that. Of course, the very public's appetite, this was the birth of the gossip industry, gave rise to this obsessed, celeb-baiting journalism that persists to this day, as do the church-based fundamentalist moralizers who blame Fatty for all the family-threatening ills of a society they believe to be straying from right living into moral decay. Remember when conservatives were concerned about that? I think it was last year, a few years ago. Bad enough, the millionaire Butterball was a degenerate perv. He worked for Jews. And Jews, as every fundamentalist knows, want nothing better than to corrupt the heart of the heartland. He was, Stahl says, a simple Kafka in a fat suit. Brilliant. All right, I'm just going to go with that introduction because we're running short on time. Well, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry. You've got to hear this. It's just the opening. This is from the novel now in Fatty's voice. In my earliest baby boy memories, my father is either looming or glum, not drunk enough, or bug-eyed and stubbly after a 3-day bender. So liquored up, he tilts when he leads down to snatch me off the burlap bags my brothers and sisters piled on the floor of our Kansas shack and called our sleepy blankets. I'd blink awake in the air, shaking cold, my face so close to Daddy's the rye fumes burned my eyeballs. He'd rattle me till my teeth clacked, then start ranting in that high Hoosier whine he only got when he was blotto and wanted to hurt something. You broke her little flower, pig boy. Whack. 16 pounds of baby, that's just wrong. Slap, punch, slap. If against my better judgment I'd speak up, ouch, Daddy, please, I'm sorry. It only made him more furious. He'd drop me outright. One blessing of being fat is that it's good padding. And strike a pose like John L. Sullivan, whom he liked to think he resembled. I'll show you sorry, Jumbo. You broke Mama's little flower, squeezing your sideshow keister out of her. If you'd never been born, she wouldn't have gotten sick. And she did get sick and die. He hated me on sight, which does something to a boy. You think? Knowing I caused so much distress for my mother and father by just being me made me want to eat. The more I ate, the more Daddy went hun on me for how fat and stupid I was. I topped 100 at 5. When my mother died, Daddy told me I killed her. Ladies and their little flowers pretty much scared me from then on because you could break them without knowing it. Or somebody could say you did. Jesus didn't need a penis, my mama used to remind me. Okay. For as long as I guess not. For as long as I can remember, she would quote the Bible to show me that sex was wrong. As I grew older, it seemed worse than wrong. It seemed impossible. After I married and suffered a droopy honeymoon, a doctor in Los Angeles said that my girth had left me with a weakened nuptial muscle. Heft problems, nothing to be ashamed of, he explained. Eat more blood meats. Dad was right. A funny thing, well, not funny, but funny, when the DA accused me of forcing myself on poor, demented Virginia Rapp in San Francisco, I felt the same way I did when Dad used to stagger in drunk and beat the molasses out of me. I knew I was innocent, but it didn't matter. Truth was whatever the person hitting you with a belt buckle needed to believe. Underneath the shock and heartbreak at how fast everybody chose to assume the worst, from bigger than Chaplin to senior dog meat in less time than the red line took from Hollywood to Glendale, there was this feeling too, Dad was right. Something happens when you lose everything. Something strange happened to me. All those years of being lucky, being successful, the first comic actor to direct his own movies, the first to make $1 million a year, I never felt comfortable. I had to pay a bootlegger to feel even half good, and after that, a croaker for narcotics. Once all my money and all my luck was used up, I could relax. I wanted to die, but at least the feeling was familiar. Does this make any sense? Before the court lynched me, I was as big a success as Daddy was a failure. And I needed the hooch more than he did. Sometimes more. After the St. Francis fiasco, I didn't need the drink. I mean, I did, but not the same way. Thanks to Virginia Rapp, I had an excuse to feel the way I had always felt, but could never explain when things were aces. There I go, rushing the gag. This book, you must read this book. It is the most heartrending, powerful book about California in the early 20th century and the industry. And I'm sorry, I'm going to skip over this because I want to get to the trailer for Permanent Midnight, and then we'll be done.
During the 1980s, Jerry Stahl was a successful television writer. At the same time, he also had a $6,000 a week habit.
When you're a junkie, your number one job is to shoot junk. I'm sure Damien will concur with me on this.
I agree with Jerry that the damage is irreparable.
I gotta get back to LA.
You're from LA?
I'm a writer.
I get it. You're like this Hemingway type who like sold out to Hollywood.
Just in the middle of a show, for no reason whatsoever, boom, she pops out and she starts singing, okay? I don't know what, she's doing like an Ethel Merman, oh, I love a parade.
So you came out cold?
Well, I had this friend, Nikki, kind of a drug buddy from high school.
Where are my pills?
You keep them in this thing?
Yes, I made.
Let's find them. They could have just gotten up and walked away.
If I was Perkin, where would I be? Come on!
He had this girlfriend who had a girlfriend who needed a green card. She was beautiful, she was witty, and she had no idea who it really was.
Jerry, Sandra showed me some of your fiction and your awards. I'm wondering if your mind can function down on our level.
Hello, Jerry. This show sucks.
He's freaking me out with the puppet.
I love your work. I think you're a tremendous writer.
Oh, no, I'm not.
I'd love to represent you. Oh. So you get this agent.
Get a great gig, huge advance, cop a habit the size of Utah.
So have you met Jerry yet? Is he here?
Go away!
Junkie.
I think more in sounds and stuff.
So tell me, what are your passions?
My passions? Everything I do.
Whoa, 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 whoa!
You are so full of self-hatred that you cannot contain it.
When you got to Hollywood, what kind of a double life must you have led?
Some stories you can tell. Some you spend the rest of your life trying to pretend they never happened.
So come back on Sunday as Devin Daimler, our scholar in residence, will lead us through this film. And thank you for your attention.